ghost that's all before that no forest play. Come join Greg and Richard right here on Dark and Red.
Hello, hello. Well, everybody, it was billed as El Clasico, but came off wash, rinse, repeat for the Reds at Selhurst Park. Nuno with a smile on his face pre-match and a reveal that a discussion with the big man and Edu is on the horizon. Four are still unbeaten, though, on the season with a chance to put a tough away match behind them. Here to discuss that and more is our resident analyst, Danscape, our Grand Madness, the Grand Madness, Andrew Cove, and our handsome adopted Texan. I was told to put that in there, by the way, Ross, from Brucey. Adopted Texan, Ross Taylor. Great to have you guys. Before we get to that, though, guys, let's get a little vibes moment going on because we need a little bit more vibes, don't we?
A team with character will find a way to beat a team with better talent. I believe that. You guys are not the team that's short on talent here today. And I swear you'll never again be the team short on character. You need to find the soul of this team again. They weren't just out here playing for themselves, they played for a city.
One or two people have suggested, in their opinion, you're looking to engineer a way out of Nottingham Forest. Can you put the record straight or set it straight and tell us what the situation is from your side?
That's nonsense. That doesn't make any kind of sense. The state is that we are focused on the game. That is more important.
As far as you're concerned, you want to continue in your role as head coach of Nottingham Forest Football Club?
Of course. Of course.
No doubts whatsoever.
Ever. Of course. Speculation around anything. What we have is to communicate and approach the final days of the market, how we're going to approach the season, prepare our voice.
I can't hear you, Rich. I can't hear you.
Lost your audio, Rich.
Oh, I'm so
Yeah,
sorry.
you go.
I'm so sorry. There you go. Error number one. I just love that man so much, and I'm so glad he had a smile on his face before the match. And I'd love to be able to throw in a little Outcast, a little old school hip hop for all those who love hip hop like Dan and I do. So appreciate you guys enduring that for a minute. But I just felt like, gosh, we need the vibes, right, Dan? The vibes. The vibes
We need
need to
those
come
vibes.
back.
You never get away with that
We
with
do.
with Greg. It's too
That's-
too vibey, that one. I like it.
Too chill.
That's my style. That it's my style.
I know. I figured I would do that because you're sort of our co-host right now, and we appreciate you and appreciate Ross and appreciate Andrew coming on. But Dan, how are you doing? How you feeling? And kind of just your initial thoughts on the match.
Yeah, I'm okay. I feel obviously a lot calmer that it was, a fairly straightforward game in the end, and Nuno had obviously addressed the issues a little bit beforehand. I think that helped, although he might not have liked answering those questions from the interviewer, but it sort of helps. I feel like from a fan's point of view, I feel like I want to know, obviously, more about how these people are feeling as opposed to the idea of just keep it all in shop and then we just find out once it's all blown up beyond all proportion. So at the minute, it does feel like what he said is probably what's going to happen. There'll be a bit of a discussion and see how they get on. But the game itself was, like you say, I got carried away. I thought there might be a bit of a reaction from us and we'd win. I should have just stuck with the obvious choice of a draw away at Palace every season. Should have gone with that.
Yeah, I didn't really take pride in putting that title together, Wash, Rinse, Repeat, but it sort of felt like, because there's so much buildup. Oh my gosh, there was so much surrounding it. The dripping with context, right? I don't remember who quoted that. I think that was Pete. Somehow Pete was involved in that, Pete Blackburn. But I love that statement, and that's what it sort of felt like was when we were leading into the match. Ross, how are you, buddy? Doing okay?
Well, thank you. Yeah, very well. Thank you for that warm welcome. I now have it on record somewhere deep and dark in the internet that I've been called handsome by somebody. So that was very kind of you.
Hey, truth is truth, my friend. Andrew, good to have you back. Glad you're back from your visit with in the UK to see your wonderful dad, and glad your son's doing well. And everyone's, I know you're not feeling great. Both of us are sort of under the weather at the moment, guys. Sorry. So I'll use that as my excuse for my mishaps and muting myself when I shouldn't be, and so forth. I'll just use it. COVID brain will be my excuse. How you doing, bud?
I'm doing good. So, as you mentioned, I got back from the UK on Sunday. The game last week, I was actually on the plane. So, watching that game was basically through the form of the WhatsApp chat groups that I'm in. So, that game literally took my breath away. I came off the plane with a respiratory illness. This game, not quite the same, sadly. But no, it's good to be back. And to the point on Tyler, I know you guys spoke a lot about this while I was away, and I saw a GoFundMe was set up. So thank you to the community and the family for everything. He's doing a lot better. He's got his appetite back. He's probably doing better than me right now. So, but yeah, thank you again to the community and the family. It did not go unnoticed, and love to you all.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, I'm so glad to hear all that. I will have to ask a question though, because we do have the maestro himself in the chat right now. When the cat's away, that's right. When the cat's away, we get vibes back. Not that Greg has no vibes, just different vibes, right, Dan? Then Greg also, is Andy wearing toilet rolls on his ears? I don't think so. It just looks like a very comfortable pillow. Is that a pillow? Oh, it's your actual chair. Very nice, very nice. Yeah, see, I'm slumming it with like this horribly non-posturepedic like chair that they would never allow people to use where I work right now. I think it was my mother-in-law's like sewing chair like 25 years ago. So I need to work on that and get something like Andy. Grateful to have Brucey in there. Great to have Stephen Howes as well. What's that?
It doubles as a gaming chair. Worst case scenario on a particularly bad Forest game, you can roll it back and go Clockwork Orange on my eyes if I need to watch the highlights.
Oh, nice.
Get up to speed on any particular podcast that I'm being on.
Yeah, I agree, Greg. It does kind of look like a big set of headphones, but we appreciate that. Andrew's very comfortable right now. His neck is very well secured. There you go. Even that you can go that route too. All right. Well, let's kind of get cracking on the match. Dan, I'm going to kind of turn it over to you for a second. So, first half started out pretty solid. Possession was high, moving the ball pretty fluidly. Didn't seem like there was a lot of disruption, somewhat akin to what we saw last week. But what are your biggest concerns about how that kind of first half just sort of progressed?
Yeah, I think it started off as a very typical away performance for me. We were sort of cautious with what we were doing. We weren't overcommitting. We were solid enough, but we looked pretty good on the ball at times. We just lacked that end product from the wingers for me. In that early stage, I think Hudson-Odoi was sort of trying to do his usual cut in and shot and that rather than cross and stuff like that. And you could see Chris Wood was a bit frustrated with a couple of those, and Ndoi, lost the ball a couple of times. And when he tried to do his cross, it ended up more as a shot and stuff like that. So it just felt like the end product wasn't quite there. But as an away type performance, it felt fine to me. And then, as the half went on, I mean, it's moments, isn't it? If Gibbs White pulls that flick off and we counterattack and go the other end, then you've got a totally different game potentially. But in that moment, it goes wrong. They get the goal, and it took us a while. Then we did sort of lose our momentum and everything. Then, and I guess that was my biggest fear with everything that's gone on this week is how would we react if there are some issues behind the scenes or whatever, and the players are aware of that. How would we react if we had that initial goal go against us, I guess, which wasn't, just wasn't too bad. It was okay in the end. It was like, we dipped off a bit, but then obviously before getting into the second half, it improved again. But it was just kind of a standard away performance. I thought we'd be a little bit more intense, but we just weren't quite at the same level as last week.
Yeah, Ross, I was gonna. Dan brings up a good point. He kind of led into what I wanted to talk to you about or ask you to kind of comment on, was just the performance in general. Morgan Gibbs White. I mean, I know he captures a lot of attention, obviously, with his being called up for England. He's had a few appearances, as we know, and we know Tuchel was in attendance as well, looking at a few players, I'm sure, on both sides of the ball. So I'm just curious what your thoughts were on Morgan Gibbs White in terms of performance and just the midfield play in general.
Yeah, I mean, first up, I would have been disappointed if Tuchel wasn't in that game because there was a lot of good things to watch on both sides of the teams. I think my biggest frustration with Morgan at large is I'm more akin to him doing the flicks and tricks in the middle and upper third versus in the own defensive third. And to Dan's point, if it works out, then great, you split the lines and it's a great opportunity ahead. But when it doesn't, it really can hurt you. And I did feel that not only that was about the 36th minute we did the flick on the edge, but it felt like the 10 minutes after, Morgan was distracted. Like there was a couple of other moments where he was dispossessed, and I think Palace got on top. I actually wrote down, I was like, I'd be happy to get in at 1-0, and they had a free kick late on. So that last 10 minutes, I think, in the first half, destabilized Morgan a little bit. But, on the international feed and the commentary, they pretty much mentioned that every touch Morgan had was like a flick or a trick or a one touch. And a lot of it worked out. But when it doesn't, and the risk is high, and to be fair, I think it was Will Hughes who pressed him a lot in the back end of that first half, then, it can be really destabilizing and costly. So don't want to pick a player out because ultimately those are all the things we want to encourage in a talisman. But I think he was distracted for the last 10 minutes that first half.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that. Yeah, it was a weird dynamic. Simply, I know, Dan, we talked about this after the first match, was the fact that it felt like everything that he was doing that is normally considered to be somewhat risk averse is probably coming off, and it's working and it's functioning and everything looks great, but then it sort of shifts. But Andrew, I'm just kind of curious what your thoughts were as the half sort of started to close, because I wouldn't call it malaise, but I'm wondering, I mean, if you look at the trajectory, like if you go to SofaScore and you look at the trajectory of attack, throughout the course of the half, you can definitely see a shift, right, at some point towards Palace. So from your perspective, what do you think maybe contributed to that, if at all? And then just give us a sense of the goal and some of the things that probably, just clearly didn't work. The Morgan flick didn't help, but just about way we managed that defensively. Did you see any causes for concern or any little moments that probably made you feel like, we just weren't switched on? Because it felt like at the end of last season, we were doing that. Anytime we committed an error in any way, we seemed to get punished for it, especially when we were at home, when we didn't win as many matches at home to close out the season. So I just want to get your take on just that late half performance and any kind of, question marks in your mind about how we managed it defensively at the end of that half.
I think you're right to call out that's always been our vice, hasn't it? We're terrible at reacting to goals. We saw that lots last season, where we would go a goal down, or we'd concede a goal, or something would happen, and we didn't show a reaction. We'd see it at the beginning of halves, at the start of the first and the second half. We don't necessarily always come out fighting or switched on as much as we need to be. I mean, goals change games. They change the perspective. They probably put you in slightly more defensive mindset because you don't want to concede immediately again. So you almost invite a little bit of pressure on, and that's how the remainder of that second half, the remainder of the first half went. To Ross's point, and that free kick they had right at the end, they hit the post. Gahey hit the post, and I think had he, that snuck inside, I don't think Sells was getting to that. We could have gone in 2-0 down at half time, and then it's a very different conversation. So we count our fortunes on that. One thing I did notice as well, and this is more just a general thing with Palace, and I did some research on this. Palace's pitch is about 3 foot. Let me just check the stats. It's 3 meters narrower than the City ground, and also 4 meters shorter than the City ground. Now, if they're playing 3 at the back and 4 across midfield, that 3 becomes a 5, and you've got a Will Hughes in there, this workhorse that can just monitor, that just the defensive midfield zone. That is a very difficult setup to break down. So the fact that we were creating chances was great. I think the point on us not having that execution of that final third and that killer ball or that killer instinct is absolutely valid. Again, we've seen that numerous times. But in terms of us breaking them down, they're well built. You look at the last 4 games they've played. Admittedly, the game in Europe was they won, but it wasn't convincing. But the 3 games around that have been very, very convincing against very strong opposition. They are not an easy team to go and play against at Selhurst Park. So I think, all in all, I think it's probably a good result. And I'd put a draw down, to Dan's point, a draw away at Palace. You can almost write it before the season's kicked off. It felt like this was the obvious result, especially with all the context prior to the game as well. So, yeah, like I say, we always react badly to goals, I guess is the summary.
Just on one thing.
Go ahead, Dan.
I was just going to say one thing Andrew mentioned there, that bit about us conceding 1 and then potentially conceding another straight afterward. How nice is it to have a team now that we sort of don't really have to worry about that? Like that first season, that was horrible. It's like you just knew once you concede that first goal, it felt like everything would unravel. And so at least we're at that point now where we've got a team where you don't really have that fear. It never felt like that. It was always a case that we could, keep in the game and just be patient, hopefully.
Yeah, it feels like there's a sort of like evolutionary process, because I think Raf calls it New Forest, right? New Forest. He keeps saying New Forest. So there's like a version of New Forest, I guess, in that sense, which is great. Yeah, you brought it, and I want to talk about that in relation to his substitutions later. But Dan, I kind of want to get your sense of, because the prevailing comments in the chat was, 1, we're not managing the wide areas. We're not really, the wingers aren't doing much. They're not being effective. So how do you think things change from through halftime? because you saw one change immediately where Dan and Doy went on the left. So I'm curious, from your perspective, talk about this in relation to him specifically. What was it about that change? Was it just that he was being coached up to just have more intent? What are your thoughts around Dan and Doy's performance at the beginning? Because he was pivotal in that first goal, wasn't he?
Yeah, first half he did struggle. He had that look about him as someone who didn't quite know what they should be doing at each point, which comes down to the fact that he probably doesn't to some extent. He's been given a load of instructions. He's new to the team, and he's trying to put that together with what actually happens in front of him. Because I'm sure every time these players go on the pitch, they have a plan, and then something different is what's in front of them, and they have to work out where to be. And it looked to me like he was trying to cover loads of ground off the ball. He was trying to be close to Chris Wood quite centrally. He would pop up centrally a lot, but then he had to get back and suddenly help Aina out if they switched the ball to that side. And it was like he was doing a lot of work, but then when he got the ball, it was like he just run out of legs to sort of do anything with it for me. So then when he switched to the other side, obviously the left-hand side is where we tend to build from anyway, isn't it? So we tend to allow Callum to stay in that position a little bit more and cover him through the midfield with Anderson. So maybe that's helped a little bit that he didn't have to do some of that work going across, as much defensive work. And it just seemed that he was a little bit sharper, didn't it, that second half? It's like he didn't have loads of the ball, but the first one he had, he took someone on, he won a corner within the first 2 minutes of the half. And obviously that's just good for the confidence as well. So he just seemed a bit more positive with it. And he put a couple of good crosses in as well before that through ball that happened, which, were pretty decent crosses, one that Chris Wood tried to get on the end of. So, yeah, I think he just seemed to be a little bit sharper, but he just seemed to have a bit more clarity about what his job was, I think, in that second half compared to the first half. And his job was more to just stay out wide, so that he could receive the ball and then cause them a problem, which is what Hudson-Odoi normally does. So I think that, I'm sort of thinking as I'm talking here, but I think that's kind of what it was in hindsight. It's that clarity of the role, and it's a simpler role. And that's probably a fair reflection of where he's at with being so new to the team and new to the partnerships with the squad.
Yeah, those are really great points. He looked a bit, I think I put it in the chat, he looked a little deer in headlights at the beginning. And we know, as you touched on, Andrew, and Dan, you've said this as well, they're always going to be a difficult team because they're so well organized, right? I mean, Nuno talks about compactness, competing, all of those things in that middle area. And to your point, it really helped them. One, that the pitch is not as wide as it is at the City Ground, but two, they found the guy who probably masters an S-housery for them. He doesn't have quite the likable personality that Ryan Yates does, but he's is that Will Hughes. Yeah, he was a bit of a pain, wasn't he, Ross, in terms of how he managed that midfield. What were your thoughts on, for example, performances like from Sangare? Did you see something similar? It's easy to pick on him because he's just that guy that everyone has this expectation level for, but yet he rises to it to a degree, but then doesn't, and he plays that role where it's like it's not flashy, it's not meant to be. You're going to do all these incredible things. You're not going to do creative, drop passes, loop them over a back line or something like Morgan Gibbs-White will do in certain occasions. But what was your thoughts on the play of Anderson and Sangare as a pairing again in this match? Did it feel like it really didn't have quite the same synergy this time around?
It certainly wasn't as stable as last week. I mean, I was first to say I thought it was Sangare's best performance in a Forest shirt last week, even if he did miss out on man of the match and things like that. This time round, I felt like first half he was a little off it in a couple of points. He had that one wild Hollywood volley. The thing about Anderson, though, in compliment to him, is I feel like I've almost set Anderson up by his own standard when it comes to how we assess him. Like it's kind of his 8 out of 10 is just better than everyone else's 8 out of 10. So, I'm always kind of looking for an alternative man of the match because the way he just has that ability to break through and dribble, and there's a couple of link ups around the corner and turnarounds and stuff with Morgan. You just get a consistent, solid performance from him, whereby Sangare was some hot and cold. Certainly in the first half, it felt like it wasn't quite humming in the way that we wanted, which might be a compliment to Palace, frankly. I mean, Walton's a very good player, and Will Hughes clearly raises his game for us. So, fair play to them, compressing the game and just being well organised and well set up. But, yeah, it wasn't a hot day for Sangare, I don't think.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, he seemed like he got turned a little bit too. He wasn't quite as quick. I think as we've seen him in previous matches, I don't know if that was just personnel oriented or just maybe didn't seem quite as switched on for certain periods of the match. But Andrew, I'm curious to get your thoughts, and I want to actually open this up to everyone on the panel today. I'm curious about your thoughts about the timing of the substitutions. I think sometimes we've in the past been a little bit frustrated with the idea that maybe Nuno's waiting too long in certain matches to bring guys on. Did you see any issues with that today? I mean, in terms of how the subs were leveraged, what your initial thoughts, or what are your thoughts on that, especially with these new talented players that we have at our disposal?
I think hindsight's 2020, and it's very easy knowing how the game progresses after the substitutions have been made to say, well, that should have taken place earlier. I think I said in one of the chat groups that I'm on, I thought McAtee looked superb when he came on. He looked full of energy. He used the ball really well. Had he been on for 10 minutes earlier than he was, great. But then you don't know, he comes on 10 minutes earlier and affects the game in a very different way. I think watching the game, I thought that he may have gone earlier. I thought he may have even gone like 55, 60 minutes rather than waiting. It was 70 minutes, I think, when the first substitutions were made. I thought he might have made the changes earlier. Obviously, at that point, when did the goal go in? Was it before the substitutions? Was it 50?
Yeah, it was before. Yeah, it was like 56, 57 minutes.
So when a goal goes in, you kind of have to ride that momentum a little bit. So if he had planned for 60 minutes and a goal goes in, in that 55 to 60 minute window, you've kind of got to see how the game evolves. So even if he had planned for that, I don't have an issue with him sitting and waiting to just see how the rest of, that phase of play and that phase of the game maps out, because momentum changes. All of a sudden, you've got a lot more of the ball. The same has happened with Forest in the first half. You end up sitting back more. You end up, absorbing a lot more possession. Palace, did that after we scored as well, because you're trying not, you're damage limitation mode at that point. So I didn't have a problem with it. Like I say, it's easy seeing how players impact the game after they've come on and saying, well, maybe had they come on earlier, it would have, been better. But I think over the last, however long it's been, however many months that Nuno's been in charge, he's got a proven track record of getting it right more than he gets it wrong for me. So I was fine. I didn't have a problem with him waiting, especially in the context of having just scored a goal. You have to just see how that plays out. So I thought all the substitutions were fine. I think Hutchinson was unlucky. I know we can say that he probably should have scored maybe one of those two big chances that he got, but he's there and he's in that window. He's in he's creating the chances, and the fact that he should have scored says a lot that he's there. He's in the mix. He's creating these big moments. So I thought they'll have an impact. The timing, like I say, is subjective. I think we could argue till the cows come home about when the right time is. I don't think he waited too long, personally.
Yeah, it's a great little analogy, right? A great little a little adage there that one who lives in Wisconsin can all wait till the cows come home. Yeah, Dan, what about from your perspective in relation to how Nuno leveraged that bench a little bit? Because you could see the stark difference, obviously, when the lineup came out, the starting 11, and who was on the bench came out, the difference in terms of what we have at our what's available to him to utilize. So from your perspective, give us sort of an assessment on specific performances from that bench. I can imagine there's one in particular you're probably a little critical about, which is probably justified given what happened, but I'm just curious to get your take on it.
I'm only critical of it in a jokey way, to be fair. When you come on for 10 minutes, I don't think you can judge any of them, that much from it. And I think what I struggle with the subs for us is that they seem to interrupt us more than they help us, certainly in an attacking sense, a lot of the time. So I'm never as keen as other people to say get them on earlier, because I think at the minute where we've been is that you're always bringing on a player that doesn't really have the experience of playing with everybody else. So you are almost asking them to do something individually brilliant to change the game, as opposed to, being able to swap Hudson-Odoi for another winger that knows the role and knows the players as well as him to come on and be seamless. And I think that's where I see it, that we just end up interrupting our flow a lot. So for me at the minute, with these new players all being very much fresh to the club and not really knowing their role, I think it's going to do that a lot. I think it's still going to be an interruption a lot until you maybe get, 6 weeks down the line and they've had games together, they've had training together, and then you'll see McAtee come on and he'll know what he does when he's playing with, because it's not just the starting 11, is it? It's like often the subs come on with other subs. So like they're sort of not only fresh to the 11 that's already been on, but then they're fresh to each other as well. And it's like, I think for me, I'm not too worried about getting subs on early unless it's a player that is a real like-for-like established swap. So I think he sort of did it right. I think Ndoye, did look leggy at times during the game, so it was right to bring him off around 60 minutes. Surprised to see Kelly Mwendo play a wider role, as opposed to, potentially try and Hutchinson or McAtee first in that instance. But yeah, they sort of did okay, and it didn't cause us any issues at the back really. It was just I just don't think you're going to see the best of these guys for a while until they're settled in.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it does feel like it's a work in progress, right? I mean, that's a probably obvious statement, but Ross, I'm curious as well about your perspective on energy levels. And what we noticed too in the second half was it just felt like we controlled things a little bit differently than maybe in at least the latter half of the first half. So do you feel like it's become sort of a pattern for us? The last match seemed a little bit more holistically like dominant, right? We felt like we started out the gates, kind of came through the majority of the second half pretty strong. In your mind, is it just the way Forest is set up? I don't know what it is, but it just seems like there's this phenomenon now. Maybe I'm completely making up a story in my head and the narrative doesn't exist, that we just can't seem to piece together a full performance. Maybe that's just football in general, but I'm curious about your thoughts on that and anybody that stood out for you in terms of just little moments that you may have seen from subs that came on, like maybe the Jesus scenario, because it looked like he had a clear chance to put that game away late. So.
Yeah, I mean, I felt pretty positive about Thomas Frank and Pep, he calls them the finishers, right? I mean, it's not just subs anymore. Some of these folks come on and finish games. I think some of the appetite across the fan base to bring them on earlier is because we've got some new toys to play with, right? We want to have a little look at some of these new toys. So I'm less bothered about the actual time, because plus minus 5 minutes can be dependent on game state or who's gone down injured or how many stoppage time you're expecting. Generally, 20-25 minutes is enough to impact the game. And I felt a couple of things are really clear. One was our bench depth was incredible relative to last season. It was incredible relative to a very credible Crystal Palace team who had 2 goalkeepers on the bench, who also made a change at 80 minutes to take off arguably one of the best midfielders in the division to bring on a defensive midfielder. They were the home side at the 80th minute, shutting up shop, while we were bringing on Hutchinson, McAtee, Jesus to go win the game. And guess what? Jesus and Hutchinson very nearly did it. So I felt pretty positive about the fact that not only were we the away side towards the end trying to close out to win it, but we actually created the chances and we came really close. And Jesus specifically was, singly driving himself forward and was unlucky to hit the post. And I think Hutchinson, if he had it back again, would dink it a little softer. So we were close. We were really close. And I think we were the dominant side that looked like most likely to win it towards the end.
Absolutely. Andrew, what about you as far as did you see anything from Callum Wendo? Because I was really excited when he came on. I think he has I think you've called this, the way that he operates, he can kind of like roam a little bit, but he drops deep, he picks up the ball, he gets things moving, similar, I guess, to a degree to Jesus in that manner. But what did you see from him, Andrew, if anything? Because like Dan said, it's so hard to make an analysis of something where there's such a little sample size. So it's going to be intriguing once we start getting into like cup matches and European matches and see how these guys get deployed and leveraged. But I was personally pleased with what I saw. I mean, again, it was very minimal, but I thought his movement was good. I thought he seemed like he had pretty good execution, good sort of awareness of what the guys were trying to do and how he fits into that.
Yeah, and I think to Dan's point, and I'll plead a partial fifth on this one, I think we'll see in due course. I think to Dan's point that these are new players. They're settling into a new country, a new system, a new group of players to play with. What I saw looked fine. I think for the brief cameo that all of the substitutes had, I think they all looked fine. I think Callum Wendo, if that's how it's pronounced, and forgive me if I butchered that. I think one thing we've seen from Nuno is that he likes players that are versatile. And I think just in that brief cameo, you saw that from him, that he can come deep, he can go wide, he can play central. Well, we not that we've seen him play central, but we assume that he has that in his locker as well. So I think that there's good optimistic signs. I mean, in that brief cameo, he looks like the sort of player that fits a Nuno squad and a Nuno team. So I think there's a lot more to come from him, as there is with all of the substitutes that came on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, everyone, thank you so much for coming, for being here and joining us on Talking Reds. But as always, please like and subscribe. That really helps us out. We don't have our sort of talisman today, right? We don't have our Greg Orm today, but we're grateful that he's spending time with his family, enjoying his nephew's wedding in Italy. He's really slumming it in a beautiful country, and actually he's been kind of like a European, the tour of the continent. So I'm very envious. Hopefully at some point in my future, I'll be able to get there, move there, convince my wife that we need to live in the UK and enjoy some opportunity to tour Europe myself. We also want to give a little bit of time to our wonderful sponsor, the Cheese Trader. So kind of hit that halfway point. So here's a chance to hear from the Cheese Trader.
This York shop is a cheese lover's paradise. The Cheese Trader is home to an array of fine British cheeses, not only selling it but offering an epic cheesy street food menu too. Guests can choose from a main dish and then select all the different types of cheese they'd like on top, alongside an array of other toppings. We tried their loaded fries and posh cheese toasties, both of which were absolutely smothered in gorgeous melted cheddar. We even chose a whole camembert to top our fries, which was so tasty, like a cheesy salt and pepper dish. The posh cheese on toast was some of the best toast we've ever had, with so many amazing flavours to it that perfectly paired with the cheese, tucked away just off Grape Lane. This is the perfect spot for a great lunch.
There's the man himself, Stu Freestone, hanging out with his favorite shirt, the black and gold, the Fawaz era. Definitely not a one-hit wonder like the Laws that was going on in the background there, but we appreciate that wonderful video. We appreciate Stu greatly. If you guys want to take advantage of it, there's a 10% discount. He gets things shipped very quickly, very neatly. It's fresh and wonderful, so please take advantage of that 10% off by quoting Talking Reds. And if you get a chance, go up to Great Plain in York and visit Stu, because he's a great guy to talk to and chat with too. He loves Forest, and he loves our Forest community, and he loves this podcast and other podcasts as well, but we just appreciate him greatly. So we're going to kind of switch gears. We talked about the match. There's only so much you can do from a 1-1 draw that you've seen over and over and over again. It's that Groundhog Day moment, right? But I kind of want to, Dan, one of the things that are near and dear to your heart is the fullback position. So we've got a week coming up. We're rapidly approaching that end of the transfer window. We're really struggling, and there was a couple of moments in that match, because he's my favorite player on the pitch now, my countryman, because I vacillate between adopting that I'm Welsh or English depending on the day, but I'm actually 52% Welsh, evidently, according to Ancestry DNA. Nico went down. I was like, oh shit, we're screwed. I mean, because he looked like he was in pain. He looked uncomfortable. He was slamming. They kept talking about how he was slamming his hand on the ground. So I'm like, please, let's not have the worst nightmare come to fruition in the second match of the season when we had no actual fullbacks on the bench. So Dan, this coming week, do you think that it'll be likely? I know we've got the stuff going on, and we'll talk about that in a second with regards to what's going to happen with Edu and Nuno and so forth. Those are obviously huge things to have to figure out and to put to bed. But what about that fullback position? Do you imagine they'll be pressing pretty hard? Because Nuno seemed to indicate they've got some stuff to do before the transfer window concludes. So what would you like to see this coming week?
It feels like it is literally the make or break decision now, isn't it? It's getting at least one, and probably one permanent and one on loan, maybe. Because if Nico had gone off, then you'd have had Morato at left back, and we saw him try that at Birmingham, and it was not very convincing at all. Or you'd have seen, I don't know, Murillo go left back, or if Einar had gone off, then Williams presumably would have moved across, and you'd still have that. And that just completely undoes us. There's just no way we play the same way with those guys playing those fullback roles. We need out and out fullbacks, and it probably is one of Nuno's biggest frustrations that we haven't identified someone over, because we've known we've needed this for not just this transfer window, but the last one, because we knew obviously Toffolo was coming to the end of his deal. We knew Moreno would be leaving on loan. So it's going to be one of the big frustrations Nuno has, is that he doesn't have, because it's his defense, isn't it? Defense is everything with him. If he's not got those guys to come in and fill in, then he's going to be extra worried about those positions, more so than a forward or whatever. And it also restricts us from switching to the back 3 or 5, because you haven't got the option to do that in game and bring on a fresh pair of legs. You would still have to use Einar and Williams, and I think the wing back role, you need more legs, not less. So you can't really do that late in a game as easily with those players. So it's a massive part of the recruitment. I'm surprised we haven't got one of those players in, because it's almost like and I get it, it's difficult because you want someone in as a backup and you're almost telling them they're backups, but at the same time, we must be in that same position with the likes of McAtee and Hutchinson, because they can't all be expecting to play. So it can't be impossible to find someone that you can convince as the right age to to come in and say, well, you're going to come in and you're going to play part of the games, but you're not going to be the first choice, and still find them over the last like 6 months that we've been looking. So it's a big worry, yeah. And it probably is one of Nuno's biggest frustrations, along with some other stuff that I suspect has gone off. It can't just be that, but yeah, hopefully a target comes along that we've not thought of, that's probably coming out of the blue, because all the names we were linked with seem to have faded away so far.
For sure. Even a loan deal, right? Maybe something. Like I think you had isolated was Emerson Palmieri, I think was one of the players that you'd put out there, Dan, which I think would be a really good,
yeah, he's
essentially a good option, right? Not
yeah,
exactly.
They literally said we don't want him anymore, and not cheap on the wages, but yeah, as a loan, it's an option.
Yeah. But he's, a veteran player that, clearly knows the league, and he's on a bit of he's at a dumpster fire club right now. I just, in case you guys are confused, it could always be worse. I was messaging with Chris Aylmer, and we both, we all know how much Chris Aylmer loves Luton Town. They are an abject disaster right now in League One. And so it could always be worse, guys, truly. But you're right. I think that would be great to get some. Go ahead.
They still got Elfie Doughty as well, who was a left back that everyone was sort of,
I think so,
raving about, weren't they? In the
he's
Premier
scrappy,
League,
right? He fits the scrappy mold, I think.
Yeah,
for sure.
I never was fully convinced on him, but people were sort of raving about him there. And Greg mentioned someone in the chat with Regulian, whatever his name is. However, that might play into some of the issues behind the scenes, unfortunately, because he's got the very same agent as Hutchinson and Douglas Luiz. So if his name comes up, then it might perpetuate some of the issues behind the scenes, or it might give you an idea that some of our recruitment is driven by other things than who everybody at the club wants, I think.
For sure. Yeah, we didn't even touch on the fact that Douglas Luiz didn't make an appearance today, so we'll try not to dip too hard into the conspiracy theories on Jurabchian being a problem. But yeah. So yes, I did, Bruce. I'm so sorry. I went PG-13 today. I apologize. Whatever that equates to in the UK, was that 15 plus? I don't know what that is. I don't know the rating systems in the UK anymore. It's been so long since I've lived there. But yeah, I just figured, if you're going to fill in for Greg Orm, you better be ready to throw a few curse words in there just to keep it like that, keep it to the norm, right? So Ross, I'm curious on your thoughts, outgoings potentially as well. So we've got you've got Taiwo, who's probably, I think Werder Bremen, I think was the team that's being rumored that he could go to, which, Paul was talking about this in the chat as well in our WhatsApp group. It makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? He came from the Bundesliga. He had success there. Again, this has just been about unfortunate scenarios where he hasn't been able to stay healthy. We're all acutely aware of that. But how good do you think that would be for him? Because we seem to have the depth we need now. It's not going to be necessary to keep him around, even though he's a great guy. And he's a good player, right? He just, unfortunately, is just, like I said, he's had those unfortunate incidences that have kind of derailed things a bit. Him, Jota Silva, anybody else that you could think of that maybe, I know Richards is not on there, Carmo, like there's a variety of different players that we haven't quite seen leave officially yet. But do you think that's probably on the roadmap too this coming week?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a busy week for some of those folks. All those names you mentioned, I would anticipate will either get permanent move or loan. And as Andrew mentioned in the comments, Emmanuel Dennis, this seems to be the elusive next one to depart. Hope he doesn't become the next Harry Arter, put it that way. But yeah, I think Taiwo, most importantly, is just great youth back on the field after what happened at Leicester. I think we're all terrified for that incident. And he is fourth choice now. He was outside the squad, maybe for, because of selection, maybe because of the transfers. But now we've got Callum Wendo and Jesus. I think that we can comfortably send him on his way. Omar Richards, it doesn't feel like he's got a pathway to be in that coverage at left back that maybe we need. So I'd anticipate, maybe within the Marinakis family of clubs, he wanders on again. But I think just to the point that Dan was making about the fullback coverage, I think it's more about actually signing a fourth choice. If you were to switch Aina over for Williams and bring Zach Abbott in, I think Zach Abbott could have quite a big year for us this year within that sort of backup pool of defenders. But the interesting one for me was that Cunha wasn't on the bench today. So you had Bolly and Morato ahead of Cunha. So maybe even Cunha gets to loan out in this coming week, which would be kind of surprising, being that we signed him only a few months ago. So busy few days ahead for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, Dowdy to Millwall makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? They're just that is like the scrappiest team. I mean, scrappy is probably putting it lightly, but Andrew, from your perspective, so let's kind of switch into the discussion around what Nuno said. I didn't get to see anything from a post-match perspective. I watched the end of the Manchester United match, and I'm sure my brother's staying quiet for a reason. That was an unfortunate result for them, but I saw Nuno had a little bit of I think a quick interview or whatever right after the match. From your perspective, this coming week, what do you think is going to happen? I mean, what's your gut telling you right now? Do you think they'll be able to kind of manage the situation and move forward? Because it sounded like Nuno was very much in favor of staying the Forest manager, which I think all of us would agree is what we want. And if you don't agree with that, I'd be curious to get your thoughts on that, or anybody else's on the panel today, and maybe an alternative if you think that he might be exiting. Because I know some of the stuff you put out there, we've all said that's it for a guy who works for Evangelos Marinakis. I think it's Daniel Story that said this the other day. That's pretty bold to do that, because clearly he doesn't really appreciate things like that, and he's not afraid to pull the trigger to a degree. But he did take some time with Cooper, even when things were a bit of a struggle. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on how this week will unfold for Nuno and that whole situation with Edu and Evangelos Marinakis.
I think if history tells us anything, it's that Evangelos Marinakis listens to the fans. Right, we saw that with Cooper. Cooper got an extended stay of execution because the fans backed him. And I think he understands that relationship that Nuno has with the fans on and off the field with the team as well, with how far he's progressed us. So I think reading between the lines, what happened with Nuno last week, it could almost be seen as a cry for help, that maybe he'd been trying to engineer this meeting and this kind of summit between the three of them to try and figure, whatever they have to figure out to make this, this working relationship work. I don't think you say that lightly. And I think the way it contradicted what he seemed to be saying in his interviews at the match today, I think that was quite telling as well. And Dan, you mentioned it in the chat a moment ago on our WhatsApp group. It's curious. It's almost what he said almost so heavily contradicts what he'd said in the press conferences the week before, that there's something going on that we don't know. I think that's absolutely 100% true, that whatever's happening behind the scenes is between the three people that we already know, between Edu, between Nuno, and between Marinakis. So the fact that they are willing to sit down and talk, the fact that Nuno is saying what he's saying publicly now is obviously a good sign. If he's saying that they're going to sit down and they're going to talk and they're going to try and figure it out, and that he wants to stay after having said what he said last week, that feels like an evolution, that maybe Nuno had to say what he had to say to get to that point, to have that conversation, to be able to thrash it out and to kind of reset that relationship. If that's what it needed to be, then that's what it needed to be. And the fact that Nuno felt he had to do that, that's a bit of a shame. But if that's what he wanted, that's what he's got, and they can sit down, they can talk it through, and they can figure out, well, none of us are going anywhere. We want Nottingham Forest to be successful. We want, Forest to be successful in Europe. We want to keep seeing the club progress, aim for Champions League, aim for persistent top six in the Premier League. To do that, we need an Edu. We need those contacts across the football field for transfers. We need an elite coach like Nuno. We need a great owner like Evangelos Marinakis, who's going to put his money where his mouth is. Those three need to figure out a way to work together. So the fact that they are willing to sit down together and talk and thrash it out and hopefully come to some sort of mutual working relationship, I think that's hopefully a good sign. And I guess time will tell, but maybe by this time next week, we'll have a lot clearer picture on what's happening. I think it's easy to read between the lines of a Danny Taylor or, a Mail Online reporter, fanning the flames because they need to get clicks. I think that there's a lot more truth out there that we don't know than what we know. So the fact that Nuno and the fact that they're willing to sit down and talk about it, I think that shows, a good positive step forward.
Absolutely. Yeah, because it seemed, at least what was reported, whether you can accept all of that at face value, which most of the time you can't, there's that just the element of it starting really poorly. So Dan, from your perspective, I know you've had a lot of conversations online about this on X. So where do you think things are headed? Did you see signs similar to what Andrew just talked about? Because he made some really good points about kind of the different tone and tenets of what Nuno was saying today. Does it feel like maybe things are starting to sort of hopefully move towards a reconciliation and a sort of repairing whatever damage was done? Because the last thing we want right now is, I apologize, my mini Aussie is very upset about this topic. Yeah, apparently she's weighing in. That's exactly right. She's howling away at the prospect of him leaving. Yeah. So from your perspective, does it feel like the reconciliation is starting to kind of move towards that direction? And do Do you see that? Because we can't have the disruption anymore, right? I mean, there's just so much that have happened under Nuno's tenure that he hasn't necessarily contributed to. But I'm just curious if you're starting to see sort of a shift, or you hope that there is one.
Obviously, I hope there is one. Yeah. I seem to change how I feel like it's going to go. Depending on the 10 minutes pass, and it feels like the things are going to change. There's a lot of like you say, from the outside, you end up trying to fill in the gaps of what does this mean and what does this statement mean and all that. And it is hard because, I think what Nuno said in that press conference originally was very delicately put. It wasn't like he went, it's sort of been blown out in terms of he didn't go in there and start, holding people up and saying this guy's not doing his job and this, that, and the other. It was still quite delicate in the way he did it. He still sort of said, look, I used to have a better relationship and it's now not. And obviously, you then throw in all sorts of context around what does that mean? Does it mean he doesn't like this guy? Then obviously you get the Athletic article, which is a sort of a source that we tend to trust. So it's a clash of personalities or a clash of plans with Edu and Nuno. So it's that, and then there's behind that there's big super agents and all that's going to be involved, and you've got power struggles there, and you sort of get to this point where you're like, wow, all this is going on at this point of time. I wonder whether Marinakis has stepped away a little bit, because obviously, when Edu comes in, the whole point is that Edu's probably going to take on some of that closer involvement with the jobs, and so maybe Marinakis has sort of stepped away, and he's not been as aware that actually this issue is boiling under the surface, because it's so late into the process of pre-season and actually starting the season that it's more catastrophic now if Nuno leaves than it would have been if Nuno had fallen out 2 months ago. Then why not deal with it then, kind of thing. So it's a strange one. I don't mind the fact that Nuno did raise it in the press conference, because if it's there anyway in the background, and it needs something that brings it to a close and brings it to a head, which sounds like, if they are going to have this meeting and actually discuss it, then it's got to be resolved one way or the other. The alternative is that it just keeps getting worse behind the scenes, and then we find out about it, once Nuno just walks away one day and we've got no explanation as to why. And in the meantime, the performances have dipped because people aren't concentrating on the game as much and all that. So I don't mind the fact that Nuno raised it myself. I know some people say he should just be like a good company man and keep everything in house and all that. I don't think that's how Nuno works. I think you'd see that in his demeanor anyway. And I think what we praise him for, that he gives down the chain to the players, is his bond and his belief and everybody being on the same page and everybody's working to the same goal. So it's not unrealistic to think that he expects that up the chain as well. And if he feels like that bit's broken, then it doesn't surprise me that he's prepared to call it out and potentially prepared to say, well, look, this is just not right for me, because I think to some extent he's done that at other clubs before. He's got to a point where if he's not got the backing, then he kind of, sees it's not going to work. And I don't think that's necessarily a terrible, terrible thing, because some managers would just see it out and the team performances dip and all that. So I'm not trying to hold him up as, the perfect human being by any stretch, but I sort of feel like his approach is everybody on the same page, whether that's players, whether that's owners, whether that's the guy in the middle that's between the owner and the manager. And so I kind of feel like if that's not right, he's trying to flag that, and that will cause him the stress that means he feels he needs to get it out there. So, whether it gets resolved, I still think it's 50-50. I'll be honest with you. I think, if they have that meeting and that discussion, I still think there's part of Nuno's comments and body language that is looking backwards a bit, which is a surprise. It is that the stuff he said on BBC radio interview about what we've achieved so far, and and then I think Paul Moore's put it in our little private chat, but I did notice it, the post-match interview, he talked about the bond that we formed last season and stuff, and there's a little bit where I still think it could go the other way, but I absolutely want Nuno to stay. I don't think I don't think you can have someone that achieved everything last season and leave him in this sort of way, if you like.
Yeah, if you've ever been, those are all really excellent, and thanks for pulling in what Paul was saying as well, because I hadn't seen it, as I mentioned. But I think when you've worked in a sort of like stratified leadership, corporate, quote unquote, environment, you recognize that there's always these little moments where you want to be trusted, especially if you've been doing a job a long time and you've sort of built some cachet and you've shown that he's taken us. I mean, what we wanted from Cooper, right, was in the end, we were grateful that he kept us up because it was a tremendous job that first season, as we've all said. Clearly what he did to get us promoted before that. So he had built up so much credibility with the fan base. And then Nuno just took it to a whole nother level because he had been there before. He had had success in the Premier League, and he's got the right personality I think we all gravitate towards, because while he's not the most boisterous guy, you know, and there's a humility about him the majority of the time. At least that's how I read him. The vibes, again, coming in, and that connectedness, like you mentioned, because Dan, I think you had a really nice post on X where you had just that great moment where he had Ola Aina on his back and giving him the piggyback ride. I think it was after we beat Ipswich, I think, last season in the FA Cup. So and on penalties. So you can see how much he loves what he's doing and the kinds of players that he has. And the way that they've done it, because it has been at the core of who we are and what we wanted to be, which is to have the same kind of closeness that we all felt with Steve Cooper. But it's just taken to a whole nother level. So you're right. I mean, it could go the other direction, because it very well may be, because we just don't see we're not privy to all the conversations that have led up to this, right? We don't know all the moments, whether that be emails or text messages or whatever it is, that he's been trying to potentially do, and that it just finally hit a point of critical mass where it's just out there now. It's like, if you're not going to listen to me and you're not going to trust me, then this is what I'm going to do, even though it might be my head in the guillotine. And, you know, maybe it's more commendable than we're giving him credit for keeping himself, you know, tempered for as long as he did. But he definitely had a little bit of a different air about him today. But you're right. I hope it doesn't go that way. But in my mind, I'm probably in the same percentage, 50-50, depending on what happens when they get in the room. Ross, I know you've been on this. Maybe it's a little bit of tongue in cheek when you said that your biggest surprise of the season was that Nuno would be gone and then Jose Mourinho would come in. But apparently somebody was listening, because that's been all over X. And Ange Postecoglou, I'll have to be honest with you, if we get Ange Postecoglou in, I love Evangelos Marinakis and I can't diminish anything he's done at this point, but my confidence meter may be like on the brink of to zero if that happens, because we can't have a person like that coming in, right? So what is it about in your head? Was it really tongue in cheek from your choice of that, or do you genuinely had seen something that maybe led you to believe that might happen?
I mean, first up, I'm Nuno in. So I think, you know, most importantly, we're ever thankful for Mr. Marinakis, ever thankful for the recruitment team, ever thankful for Nuno. And we hope they kind of work out whatever they've got to work out. My biggest grievance right now is this is just grumble season. This is the nonsense that comes when the transfer window's open and the season starts. Like, these managers are in the business of delivering results. And you're hearing grumbles from Marco Silva, Oliver Glasner, everywhere. And the sooner this transfer window can shut and we can just be like, our coach is our coach, he prepares the team, and they ready the talent they've got to go win matches, then hopefully this goes away. The other part with Forest is, because we have this degree of infamy around us around transfer windows, any sort of noise just gets amplified all the more. So I really hope that this is just part of that silliness and we're not really having a conversation about the next new manager. But I think part of my rationale for proposing the fact there may be risk here is we are now a Europa team with a chairman who has very, very high expectations, And, you know, now we're in a different, maybe arguably a different stratosphere when it comes to approaching different types of coaches. And we can argue whether Mourinho would be the right choice or whatever, but he has a history of winning trophies. So are we now in the conversation for that? And that was partly why I feel that Nuno is probably at this stage now where he recognizes that he has to deliver, and he needs to get to the point where his squad is bedded in and he has every opportunity. Now, the thing for me that's ironic is, if it's true, as per the reporting, signing Adama Traore is not the hill that I would die on, frankly, because, you know, there's lots of other players and we all know he's a little mercurial, and you've got Amari
maybe
Hutchinson.
Right, Dan?
So, you know, I would recommend betting in Amari Hutchinson and getting the most out of that young prospect than betting your house on Adama Traore. But I don't know. I'm speculating. I hope it's not that, and I hope they make it up and we can focus on what's right, and that's winning football matches.
Yeah, thankfully, again, you don't want to take any Premier League team for granted. But next week, you know, the good thing is we're playing West Ham, so who are a bit of a mess right now. But yeah, that's all. I completely agree with everything you just said, Ross. I mean, you always have to be open to the fact that with success, with beating the timeline, if you will, on getting to Europe and being in that kind of competition, everything that went on. And I think Steve Parrish, I'm not going to dwell on this because I don't want to give it any more airtime than it's worth. Steve Parrish, I would highly look at your own fan base before you look at ours or anything that Forest does very quickly, because that banner was about as deplorable as it gets. So just go, please, Steve Parrish, no more. Just, focus on yourself, look internally, but I'll digress from that. Yeah. I just want to kind of conclude. I know we've kind of hit that point where we're about to end here. I'll give the time to Andrew to give his final thoughts, and then we'll switch to Dan, and then we'll conclude with Ross. Go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, I mean, we're 2 games in and we're unbeaten. Let's look at it that way. A very difficult away game at a team that are fighting in Europe and have got a good track record recently over the last few games, that are well structured, well disciplined, that are difficult to break down and beat. And we took a very good point on the back of a very promising opening day performance and result. I think one of the chats I saw said that, if and, hopefully when we beat West Ham next week, we come out of the first 3 games 7 points out of 9. If you'd offered us that before the season started, I would assume most people would have happily accepted that and moved on to the international break, firmly happy and a smile on their face. So I think with the signings that we've got, to Dan's point, they're going to take time to bed in. We need to give them time. I think those initial signs, and I called McAtee out earlier, I like what I saw from him. I think we've now got options off the bench, we've got depth, and we've got quality off the bench, and that's only going to improve over time as they get used to the system. If we can sort this Nuno, Edu, Marinakis love triangle out, I think we'll be fine, and I think there's nothing to suggest we can't aim for top 6 realistically this season. So yeah, I'm in a good place. I think it's a long season. It wouldn't be Forest if there weren't some sort of issues at some point along the road. So I think we'll get over it. I think we'll be fine. I think they will work out their differences, and I think it's going to be another bumper season.
Fantastic. Dan?
Yeah, I'm still 50-50, so I'm not as convinced as Andrew on that. I still think.
Where's the vibes? Come on. I gave you hip hop at the beginning. Get the vibes back.
I think, like Ross said, it's this transfer window bit. That there's still another week from Monday of that to go on, and then there's an international break for 2 weeks, which is where the new signings will bed in. But it's also where, if you're going to change manager, you probably change manager just before that, so they've got 2 weeks on the training ground. So this might actually rumble on to the end of next week. Hopefully not, but hopefully it's something where they just resolve it and everything carries on as it is. But it could still be an incredibly tumultuous week, unfortunately, in terms of signings, but in terms of off the pitch, I hope not, because for me, stability is everything. We hear it all the time from managers and all that about stability and pre-season and getting players in. So to change manager now, probably for me, you just don't know how the season's going to go at this point. Having seen what we've seen, I'm confident, like Andrew, that it's a good season. But we've got the players, we've got the the starting 11, we've got the players coming in. But if this week turns out to be a whatever circus, then that just goes out the window for me. So I need to get past this coming week, I think, basically. Other than that, happy.
Good. Ross, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, first up, I think we look great in that away kit, so that's important. That was nice.
That's a good point. We didn't even talk about that. Very good.
Yeah. Nice also that Anthony Taylor tried to ruin it in the 60th minute or so, but didn't get to ruin the game. So that was also nice. Long may that continue. And the other part is it's always nice to know that we've got a goalkeeper who can just launch the ball versus the nonsense that Manchester City did yesterday. So that's also nice to know. And I hope for the rest of the season we don't get too much Efanakoku on the international stream, because that was dry today.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it was brutal. Well, thank you guys. I appreciate it. Great. Thank you, Ross. Great points. Yeah, the thought that keep coming to my mind and why I had to put this on, you probably can't see it, but it says Forest or Magic. It's the Art of Football hoodie that I'm wearing that I could actually finally fit in because I've actually chosen not to eat sugar and fat at ridiculous rates anymore. But I appreciate everything you guys talked about today. Appreciate the comments in the chat. Definitely appreciate Nuno Espirito Santo. I think he's just the end scenes there of him, doing this to the fans. I think he knows we're behind him. We don't want to see, for whatever your reasons are, because you just love him as a manager and just appreciate and revere him for what he's done, combined with the fact that you just with all this great momentum that we have as a club, don't disrupt that. Don't change that. We need someone like Nuno in there to continue that forward. And to your point, we've got to keep those positive vibes flowing. I want to see more videos from Aina. I don't want to see a week where we don't get one of those, because that's probably a good barometer for where things are, unless he's literally got COVID like me and is like bedridden and can't speak to it. But even then, we better have a damn fullback to come in if that stuff kind of happens. But just appreciate the fact that Morgan as well kind of like, motioned to Nuno and said, yeah, kind of keep that going. It shows you what the players are. It's the captain saying, yeah, we're behind this guy too, guys, not just you guys as fans. So for us, they're still Magic. We're going to do well. We're going to have a good week, I hope. Things they can get better. We'll get better, and I'm feeling confident about that. And I think the reconciliation will come, because one thing we know about Marinakis, he's not an idiot. The guy knows how to ensure that his businesses can be successful. That includes football clubs, and so he knows probably it's not a good idea at this stage, to move on without Nuno involved, because it will just create too much challenge, I imagine, right now. But if nothing else, it also just keeps the fan base engaged. It keeps all of us believing, having a guy like that at the helm, along with the players that we have. And to your point, you guys' points too, those other players, those new players, they'll fit in. He'll help them acclimate. He'll get the best out of them as well, including those like Hutchinson, who I know have a lot of pressure on them right now, especially considering what he costs. So come on, you Reds. It's going to be a good week, guys. I'm convinced of that, but we appreciate everyone, and we'll see you next time.
Stats, sorry, falling down the forest blade.